She was only the technician in the corner, until the warship went blind and followed her. Elena Marquez did not belong to the ocean the way sailors said they did. She belonged to waveforms, harmonics, the way a bent connector could turn a sentence into noise. Contracts sent her from pier to pier, ship to ship, a civilian badge that opened doors reluctantly. A destroyer was just a steel office to her, except the corridors moved and the floor forgot to be polite. The crew called her tech, which suited her fine. To be seen too clearly on a warship was to become a problem someone would try to solve. The Combat Information Center breathed at night. That was the first thing she noticed when the ship got underway. CIC wasn't loud so much as alive, a hive lit by screens instead of sun. The air smelled like coffee and ozone, like overheated plastic that had decided to behave anyway. Green sweeps drew circles into the dark. Sailors murmured bearings and ranges with the calm of people naming stars. Elena's stool lived against the bulkhead beside a rack that hummed at precisely the frequency she loved best, a clean, high E that meant the power supplies were happy. Her job that week was a nuisance no one wanted to own. The primary air search radar had developed a stutter visible only if you stared too long, like a heartbeat dropping 1 beat in 200. It wasn't enough to scare the watch team. It was enough to wake Elena at odd hours, numbers arranging themselves behind her eyes. She'd traced the fault to a firmware update in a control module whose manufacturer insisted it could never fail under load. She had written a tightly worded email with 3 graphs and 1 plea: roll it back before it rolls us. The email had joined the great museum of emails that might save a life someday and almost never do in time. The Arabian Sea was wearing winter that night. Black glass between long swells, wind pushing sand-brown haze off the continent. In the CIC, night watch had settled into the rhythm of keeping a moving city from getting surprised. The tactical action officer sharpened his pencil because it made him feel lucky. The bosun's pipe had long fallen silent. Up forward, the 5-inch gun slept like a lion. On the bridge, the officer of the deck made small changes with big consequences: a degree left, a degree right, the choreography of staying unpredictable. Elena pushed her glasses up and coaxed data out of a recalcitrant panel. Her laptop sat on a folded rag to stop it skating on steel. Code scrolled, then stopped at the same ugly line it always stopped at, a handshake that should have been intimate refusing to greet. She rubbed her thumb across the spacebar, thinking of her father's radio bench back in San Diego. Coils, solder smoke, the smell of dust warmed by valves. He'd taught her to listen for what a circuit meant, not just what it did. Ships, she'd learned, were no different. They hummed when they were honest. Tonight, something in the hive sang slightly off-key. At 22:03, the link picture flirted with them. Pickets off the beam, an amphib 4 hours to the east, a patrol plane drawing careful flowers in the sky. At 22:11, a junior sailor at the surface scope asked for relief because his eyes had forgotten how to blink. The supervisor shook a packet of instant coffee into a bottle of water, shook it like a maraca, and handed it over. CIC laughed softly in a way that released pressure and kept the room from floating off. At 22:17, the radar count went wrong by exactly the amount Elena feared. It began like an exhale. One sweep hesitated, not enough to bother a casual eye, just enough to make her look up from the code. The next sweep froze mid-arc. For a heartbeat, the scope was a photograph. Then every scope in CIC went black at once, like someone had pulled night over their heads a second time. Silence is rarely real afloat. Machines fill it. But this was a new kind of quiet. It had intent. Then the comm station gave a single flat squeal and died. The data links blinked to nothing. Consoles rebooted and returned with blank faces, as if, suddenly, they did not know what a C was. The TO's head snapped up. Report. Spy picture lost, the senior air controller said, as if he could make it true and untrue by saying it clean. QDX down. No fleet broadcast. The comms watch added, voice clipped. Link 16 no joy, the TDL ops said, tapping a key that had always been loyal. The tactical air controller held his headset away from his ear like it had hissed. The plotting table went from galaxy to void. On the bridge, voices crowded the squawk box. Bridge, lookouts report multiple low lights. 10 to 12, bearing 320, closing, rapid. The bosun's pipe shrieked a call nobody wanted to hear at that hour. Somewhere deep, The ship's heart shifted speed. The destroyer had gone blind and deaf exactly when the ocean decided to talk. Elena's fear arrived as data, not panic. The simultaneity of the failure, the way links and radar and SATCOM had collapsed together, that wasn't grease on a connector. That was intent. Code had come in wearing a trusted face and rewritten the part of the ship that names the world. She felt herself get very still, the way her father did before he touched a live chassis. Backup radar. Tio barked. Mkin Alpha wouldn't kill both. This isn't our switch, the air controller said, as if arguing with physics. CIC, bridge, small craft lights increasing, estimate 20, speed high, range 2 miles and decreasing, the loudspeaker said. The voice outside had a wind in it, and a fear it was killing by will. A fast boat swarm. Not legally hostile by the rulebook. Not yet, but as expressive as teeth. Set general quarters. The captain's voice said from a place that made steel pay attention. The ship flinched and began putting on armor. Elena's hands had already gone to the EW rack. She patched her laptop in with a cable that had no right to be as important as it was. Her fingers moved before questions could arrive. She found processes that had no business living and watched them respawn as fast as she killed them, a hydra with better documentation. She slid lower level, past polite APIs, down into the place where bootloaders negotiated with power supplies. Safeties barked at her. She told them she was busy. The TO leaned over her shoulder without quite touching. He was younger than the wrinkles on his forehead suggested. Talk to me, Tech. She kept her voice flat to keep other people's hearts quiet. This isn't failure. It's a kernel hijack. Something sitting on the control path, spoofing healthy, gagging outputs. I can tear it out if I can get to the boot line. How long? I don't know. Honesty made her mouth taste metallic. If they built this well, 5 minutes. If they built it like most of us do, 2. We don't have 2, he said, and didn't make it sound like accusation. The watchstanders moved like a choir whose conductor had thrown away the music and told them to sing anyway. Consoles came back with angry red messages. Integrity check fail. Link lost. Transmit inhibited. Guns trained by hand to train guesses. CIC, that dark brain of the ship, got louder. Reports, repeats, orders and voices that needed to be believed. Through it, Elena chased a thread down into the ship's nervous system. From the bridge, boats bearing 315, 318, 320, ranges 1.2 nautical, closing. Some dark, some flashing. Not fishing. The OD didn't say the other word. Suicide. He didn't need to. Everyone could do that math. The captain entered CIC like a pressure change. He wore calm like a suit that fit. His eyes found the blank scopes, then the faces at those scopes, then Elena. Glasses, hoodie under a borrowed navy jacket, hair tied back with a plastic clip because there was no time to find the elastic that had snapped 10 minutes ago. Ms. Marquez, he said, putting respect into civilian syllables on purpose. Can you give me back my picture? Yes, sir, she said, because anything else would have been treason against numbers. Tell me what you need. Someone to sit on the comms console and keep that process down when it tries to stand up. Someone to watch the power rails on the spy control rack. If they sag, I'm going to fry a board. And no one breathe loudly behind me for 90 seconds. He looked at his people and made it true. 2 ratings snapped into place at her flanks. The TO moved back just enough to signal faith. Elena pried open a system window that was never meant to be seen underway. She cut a service loop, rewired it with code, lied to a watchdog timer, lied again to a checksum that thought it knew the world, and then told one small truth to the bootloader. Start clean, but start with this. If she got the sequence wrong, the radar would stay a statue. If she got it right, it would wake up angry and honest. On the squawk box, a lookout said quietly, "Sir, I can see faces." A pause. They're grinning. The tactical picture in her mind drew itself without screens. 20-odd skiffs, some with outboards screaming, some with engines tuned to hum. A few carrying fireworks for intimidation, a few carrying more, a few already riding the bow wave they would use to climb the ship's steel skin. Chaff grenades would confuse cameras, but not men with teeth. CRAM and CIWS wanted radar tracks to be legal, to be sure. Elena wanted a colonel to be kind. She typed like a metronome, learning how to hurry. The comms process she'd killed returned, persistent as a cockroach. Left side. Her makeshift helper at the console murmured, fingers flying. I've got him. Holding him down. The power rail sailor reported, stable. Ripple within spec. Her laptop threw a dialogue that in any other room would look mundane. Override persistent? Y/N. She hit Y before the thought finished forming. Nothing. Then something. A LED on the EW rack flickered. The scope nearest her tried to draw a line and failed. Somewhere above, the ship's hull sang one of its sleepy songs as the bow bit into a swell. The noise threaded through Elena's bones, familiar and wrong at the same time. She told the machine one more lie that sounded a bit like love and hit enter. For a heartbeat, CIC held its breath. From the bridge, boats inside 1,000 yards. Some splitting to starboard. One crossing our bow, 200 yards. The OOD's knuckles whitened around a pencil. The captain's face did not change. Gunners' voices turned into the slow counting of men aiming without a picture, aiming with eyes and nerves and the memory of drills that promised to stand in for gods. Elena drilled deeper. She dropped into a subshell she had no clearance for and decided to ask permission later. She could feel the exploit. They'd come in through a maintenance port that had been left alive for convenience and never taught the difference between friend and thief. She found the ghost process, a polite parasite naming itself like a patch. She highlighted it. Her finger hovered. Somewhere, a laugh from the deck, too loud, the kind of laugh men make when the horizon looks like teeth. Somewhere, a prayer, tasted and swallowed. Do it, the TO said, not harsh, just low. She killed the ghost, rewrote the boot path, and yanked the power cycle on a rack that would prefer to file a complaint with someone ashore. The room went a fraction darker as the system did a small death. Screens that had been ghosts choosing to show nothing went honestly black. Elena counted an old rhythm, 1,000, 1,000, as if timing a child's breath. She watched the heartbeat LED. It thought about duty. It chose it. The rack came up mean and pure. Her laptop flashed a string of text only she could love. CRC mismatch. Forcing clean image. Boot. The nearest scope drew a single green line. Then it swept. One circle, too. It began to put freckles on its face. At first they were noise, the ocean trying to be thunder. Then the freckles became the shape of wolves. Painting returns, the senior air controller said, voice cracking and then swallowing the crack. Multiple surface, bearing 295 through 325, ranges 7 to 500 yards, closing. Confirmed at surface tracker. Another voice said, this one almost reverent. I've got them. Guns, track numbers. Tau. Assigning. The fire control man replied, fingers at last where they belonged. Elena felt the room inhale, and in that breath was the tiniest taste of reprieve. The ship shuddered. Not from weapons, yet, but from choice. The captain turned to the TAO, to the OOD standing ghost-like in the doorway between his bridge and her cave, to the people who had fed him the world for years. He nodded once, and the nod contained 1,000 drills. Engage if engaged. Warn if warning will do. Keep them off my hull. Elena didn't look up. She was still chasing stragglers in the code, processes that would try to reclaim tomorrow if she didn't staple them down tonight. She opened a watchdog, chained it to another, built a fence out of instructions that would hold until someone with more time and authority could weld a real gate. She thought briefly of the email she had written and the graphs she had included and allowed herself one solitary, petty sentence in the back of her head. I told you. On the bridge, the warning horn bellowed, a sick cow's cry that had made stronger men than these flinch. The ship spoke, translated by the loudspeaker into assertive, accented English. Unidentified small craft. Alter course immediately. You are approaching a United States warship. You are standing into danger. The phrase had been printed, laminated, taught. Tonight it sounded like a mother telling teenagers to put down the fireworks. They did not. The closest boat flashed a light like a dare. Another spat something that might have been tracer into the sky to see how it would look on someone's screen later. A third throttled across the bow and hit their own wave wrong. Men scrambled, laughed, cursed. Elena watched numbers, range tickers sliding down, turn into a kind of emotion. CRAM standing by. CIWS warming, a weapons chief reported. The ship, impossibly, felt both heavy and light. Elena's cursor hovered over one last knot of code, a tangle sitting too close to the bus controller for her liking. If she touched it and it pulled loose the wrong way, The picture might die again for 30 seconds, forever, at this range. If she left it, it might decide to pull her fence down when she blinked. She breathed into the count of 4, tea trick her mother had taught her in a kitchen that never dreamed of war. She exhaled to the count of 6 and went for the knot. Bridge, boats at 800, 750. 1 crossing to port, bow on. 1 to starboard, line abreast. The lookouts chanted from the weather. The ocean outside hissed against steel like a fuse arriving at its conclusion. Elena stabbed enter and committed her edits to a live system that didn't want to be edited. The rack thought about mutiny. She showed it a reason not to. A bloom of green points brightened simultaneously across the scopes, like someone had given the ship its eyes back all at once. Elena didn't see the faces around her change. She felt it, like static equalizing, like a room deciding to share a single heartbeat. After weeks of being the woman in a hoodie who was always in the way, she became the shape people turned toward when they needed to be alive. Tio, the captain said, already moving. We have what we need. We have what we need, he answered. And there was love in it, for his team, for his ship, for the green glow that meant the night hadn't beat them yet. Very well, the captain said, and his voice put a line under everything that would happen next. Elena tightened the last bolts in her software fence, saved a copy to the little encrypted drive she wore like a locket, and only then risked looking up. The nearest sailor, kid from Indiana who'd never seen an ocean before the Navy hired him, had tears shining like the reflection of radar in his eyes. He wiped them away with the back of his hand without shame and said, not to her, not to anyone, we've got them. From the bridge, the horn bellowed its last warning. From the forward deck, a chain clanked with intent. In the scopes, the nearest boat crossed a line that the rulebook and every human in CIC agreed upon without a meeting. Elena flexed the hand that had done the work and realized it was shaking. Somewhere in the machinery of the ship, relays clicked like bones being set. She lowered her eyes back to the code, because until the first round flew, the most important war was still happening inside the racks, and highlighted the command that would lock her patches into persistence through power cycles. She could hold it with muscle, fighting the ghost process with pure human speed, or she could make the fix survive the next surge. It would take another 20 seconds in which her concentration could not afford a single stray thought. Boats at 600, the lookout said. Someone gulped audibly and didn't apologize. Elena swallowed once, turned off the part of her brain that loved being alive, and pressed the key that told the ship to trust her for just a little longer. Elena pressed the key, and for 20 seconds the ship's fate lived in silence measured only by the hiss of air handlers and the thrum of turbines underfoot. Her patch crawled into the firmware like roots into cracks, pushing out the parasite code that had blinded them. The radar racks complained, blinked, and then steadied, green LEDs glowing like tired eyes that had decided to keep watch after all. Persistence achieved, she whispered to herself, though the words went into the room as much as into her screen. Scopes holding steady, the senior air controller confirmed, his voice rising as though volume could reinforce truth. All contacts tracked. 21 small craft, bearing constant, closing fast. The captain gave a single nod. Weapons, free to engage if hostile intent confirmed. The words changed the oxygen in the room. Now the line between warning and war was thin as paper. The swarm of fast boats, lit by running lights that mocked legality, was inside 600 yards. Some carried heavy machine guns, barrels gleaming even in the night. A few had ladders lashed to their sides, the kind of detail that made blood go cold. Elena kept her eyes on the streams of code, watching for any attempt at resurrection. The ghost process twitched once, tried to reassert, and was swatted by the fence she had built. She exhaled only when it lay still. Around her, sailors leaned into their scopes, voices overlapping with ranges and bearings. Port side, 2 skiffs weaving, 300 yards. Starboard, closing at flank speed, contact painted with mounted weapon. Centerline, 5 craft bow on, spreading formation. The captain did not shout. He spoke, and men obeyed. Forward gun, fire warning shot. The deck shuddered as the 5-inch barked, the concussion a physical slap through steel. A geyser of water erupted 50 yards ahead of the lead skiffs, cascading silver under the moon. Any rational mariner would have turned away. These did not. They're accelerating. A lookout reported, incredulous. The captain's jaw tightened. Very well. CIWS, engage. The phalanx cannon screamed to life, a metallic buzzsaw that turned night into shredded daylight. Tracers stitched across the sea, slashing the waterline in incandescent lines. One skiff vanished in spray and debris. Another veered wildly, spilling men into the black. Still the rest came on. CRAM, Priority Starboard Group, TO ordered. The launch was less violent, more clinical. A flash, a streak, a detonation that rolled across the sea like thunder. When the spray cleared, 2 boats were gone, reduced to wreckage. Elena forced herself not to flinch. Her role was not to fight, but to keep the ship's eyes open. If the code rose again, they would all go dark in the middle of the brawl. She hovered over her laptop, fingers ready to kill new mutations. Her body screamed for flight, but her mind had committed to hold. The boats pressed in, 200 yards, some closer. Machine gun fire rattled, bullets slapping the hull and ricocheting harmlessly from armor. One skiff threw a rocket that spiraled wide, detonating in a useless fireball against the waves. Another boat tried to cross the bow and was caught by the 5-inch, exploding in a blossom of flame. Through it all, Elena tracked numbers, ping intervals, CPU load, rail voltage. The ship's systems were stable, her patch holding. The radar swept like a heartbeat returned to rhythm. Every pulse meant another chance to survive. Minutes stretched, then contracted. One by one, the boats broke, scattered, fled. Some trailed smoke, others burned outright, their crews clawing into the sea. The survivors vanished into the haze, throttling away at reckless speed. Contacts breaking off, the surface controller announced, almost disbelieving. Range increasing. Maintain track until they're ghosts, the captain said. His voice was calm again, the voice of a man reclaiming control of his ship. Only then did Elena lean back. Her hands trembled, and she realized her knuckles were white from gripping the console. Sweat chilled on her neck. She had never fired a weapon, never shouted an order. And yet the destroyer still floated, her crew alive, because she had refused to let numbers lie. The captain crossed to her console. He looked down at the civilian in the hoodie, laptop still tethered to Navy steel, and for a long moment, he said nothing. Then he raised his hand and saluted. It was not in any manual. Civilians did not receive salutes. But his arm was crisp, his intent sharp. And one by one, the sailors in CIC followed, hands rising in unison until the room glowed not with radar, but with respect. Elena's throat closed. She managed only a nod, but the gesture carried the weight of every unspoken word. The official reports would smooth the story. Temporary systems disruption. Crew response prevented hostile escalation. The press release mentioned resilience, readiness, standard training. No one wrote about a contractor with a stubborn streak and a laptop. But in the mess decks, in the watch bills, in the spaces where sailors whispered to each other in the half-dark, the truth was clear. The destroyer had gone blind, and when no rank and no call sign had the answer, the crew followed the quiet woman in the corner. In the days after, sailors she barely knew nodded to her in passageways, small smiles tucked under their professionalism. A petty officer left a can of Dr. Pepper on her console without explanation. A young seaman asked her, awkwardly, to explain how she'd made the ship breathe again. She answered as simply as she could, I told it to trust me. One evening, when the horizon was calm and the sun bled orange into the sea, the captain found her on the weathered deck. He leaned against the rail, coffee in hand. We'll never put it in the logs, he said. But you bought us the time we needed. Elena looked at the water, restless even in peace. I didn't fight the battle, she said quietly. You kept us in it, he corrected. That's the difference between a story we tell and a memorial we build. The waves slapped against the hull, steady and endless. Elena felt the numbers whisper again, intervals, probabilities, survival. She had been invisible once. But now, even if no report ever wrote her name, she knew what the crew knew. When the ship went blind, she had given it back its eyes. And the night a warship saluted her first would never leave her.